Let's move on now to VAT-related changes. Yeah. And I picked out 4 areas, but first let's start with, very quickly, the deletion of refund claims from withholding VAT.
It's certainly not a very good move, if you ask me. It's not good for businesses, because what you're technically saying is that going forward, businesses will not be able to apply for refund, even when it is very clear that it's arising from withholding VAT. And basically how withholding VAT works is you are registered for VAT, you supply to someone who has been appointed by the government to be an agent. They then withhold 2% of that in advance, and then they limit to the government. So the fact that it is now being dropped, then it certainly means that it may affect some of the players in the market, given that they are not able to claim it. But most importantly, in my view, Samaina, on the withholding VAT, it's one of those taxes that I feel have been overtaken by time. The main reason as to why the government introduced it was, one, to do with compliance. You want to ensure that someone supplying, the government has visibility on someone X supplied to government, and this is the match that they made from that particular transaction. So at the end of the day, then there's no possibility that you'll not declare that income, and if you don't, they'll come for you. Yeah. And number 2, of course, is from a cash flow perspective, which then the government is able to manage. But from a business side of things, of course, it impacts heavily on their cash flow, because remember, someone is withholding 2% upfront. They're not able to pay you that amount. Yeah. And number 2, also, it's a compliance burden, and a big one for that matter, because you actually account for withholding VAT every 5 working days. So if you look at the reasons, especially the one for compliance, now that we have things like e-teams, we have done a lot on technology. In my view, I think it is one of those that then you don't have to keep doing that withholding, so that then you eliminate this compliance burden on taxpayers. And also you are able to help them manage their cash flows better. I don't think cash flow should be the biggest headache for the government.
Let's talk also about the refund timeline. It has been reduced from 24 to 12 months. Good or bad?
Bad. And the reason I say bad is because it's more or less like disallowing someone a credit on a technicality. Mm-hmm. So you're basically saying that businesses should track their refunds, and anything that goes above 12 months and you have not made an application with the Revenue Authority, then you're considered to have been time barred, and there's no conversation. So if it's a billion or whatever number, then that one is gone. Basically on technicality, if you ask me. But I think I get where the government is coming from. I'm probably trying also to harmonize that timeline with other form of taxes, because I think for other transaction taxes, the timeline was 12 months. Mm-hmm. But for VAT, it was never amended when the other laws were being amended. So we now have that one as 24. So it's basically bringing them to speak to each other.
So these are the part of zero rating items moved to VAT exempt. For example, pharmaceuticals, electrical vehicles, solar tech, all these zero-rated items moved to VAT now exempt. What's your take on that?
So again, as part of the policy that the government appears to have adopted, I think if you look at the medium-term revenue strategy again, you'll actually notice that there's broad pronouncement that there will be review of the tax expenditure. And basically the tax expenditure is in form of the exemptions that we have, incentives, preferential tax rates, and those kind of things. So I think we also expect to see more of those as we go along, things moving from zero-rated to exemption. Of course, you know what that means, and things moving from exemption to standard rated. So we expect to see a bit of more of that. What worries me is the risk that you have, that we are looking at, because pharmaceuticals are quite critical, for the citizens, and also looking at the agenda that the government has for the health sector. But you also notice that now they're being moved from one place to the other. So that's the biggest worry. I think what we should then encourage the government to do is probably to look at what is, because there is a reason why some of those things were put where they were put. So maybe it's to encourage them to look at the risk and do it in the form of priority, and so that then we can also have coherence in terms of the broader policy and what the changes that we're going to see.
I feel like I need to explain a few things to our viewers. I feel like there's a lot of technical jargon here. We are moving zero-rated to VAT exempt. What are we doing here, really?
When you have zero-rated, what it basically means is that when you incur input VAT, that is, you have bought you have bought a product that has been charged VAT more than 100,000, you have paid VAT of 16%. You have paid VAT of 16. So from a zero-rated perspective, you can actually go to the government and claim a refund of that 16%. So which is then translates to more or less like government expenditure, because then they have to get that money from somewhere and give it back to you as a business.
Yeah.
So when you go for to exempt, so and you incur that 16%, what happens is that you expense that 16%. You actually don't take it as a deduction, because mostly you can offset from the output tax, but for exempt, you just expense it and it stops there. So it's a good tool for the government in the sense that they don't end up incurring a lot of tax expenditure.
On the same breath, VAT introduced on formerly exempt items, for example, renewable energy equipment, tourist vehicles, interesting items here.
And you see, when you look at it, there's policy reason as to why they were introduced. For tourism, of course, we wanted to encourage tourism. For renewable energy, of course, there's something we want to do about our climate and that agenda. Again, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier in terms of probably us critically looking at the list and ensuring that there's coherence with the broader government policy.
Two things now on the tax procedures and administration as we come to a close. One is the tax refund processing, which has been extended to 120 days. Yeah. And there's a waiver of penalties due to ETIM's errors. What's your sentiments on those two areas?
Yeah, maybe to start with the waiver of penalties on the errors. I think that one is a fantastic one. And the reason I say that is because today, if even you go to your iTax, and I hope you can give me your details, I can check for you. So in terms of, you'll realize sometimes you have penalties that have been imposed. Maybe the system did not, record the payment in good time. Quite a number of penalties and interest that do not have a good basis. Yeah. So remember what happened some time back is that the government repealed the window of waiver of penalties and interest. So without that particular law, so then the commissioners' hands are tied. They wouldn't have the capacity then to even, reverse the genuine penalties and interest, the penalties and interest that have not been levied genuinely. So it's a positive one. For me, I still think that we can still go back to what we had before, waiver of penalties and interest, even on, matters of misinterpretation of law. And I think the reason why the government, what I said, is that the government removed it because it was being abused. But if only we could tighten the nose a bit and ensure we have good controls, I think waiver of penalties and interest is a good to have within the provisions of the law. Of course, the other one that you have mentioned is the extension of 120 days to... So what happens is that today, if you apply for refund, the commissioner is given 90 days to come back to you. And if they don't come back to you, then that refund is deemed to have been allowed, or rather to have been approved. Yeah. But then if it is subjected to an audit, the commissioner is given 120 days. So within 120 days, he should come back to you and tell you, we have audited you, this is the amount that is due to you. So what you're basically saying is that those days being increased, from 90 to 120, from 120 to 180, probably because of the experience they have had in the past few months, maybe too short for them. But maybe we should increase the resources so that then timelines remain the way they are. Yeah.
Anyway, as we come to a close, just public sentiment and contextual issues, for example. Public perception matters to do with economic impact. How does this bill, when you look at it, respond to last year's public outcry? Do you feel like we have addressed some of these areas, particularly on Kenya's youth and the civil society? Or are we about to see some streets again?
Probably we have. I mean, if you look at, looking back, if you look at the Finance Act, and I like looking at that analysis, so most of those acts have been raising astronomical amounts, so to say. Like, I think we moved from 50 billion in 2022. 2023, we moved to 211 billion Kenya shillings. Of course, the bill of 2024 was 345 billion. Tax Laws Amendment Act was raising around 175 billion. So those numbers, in terms of being new measures, they certainly then speak to a pinch more into the pockets of Mwananchi. So I would say that maybe we have seen a bit of response to what happened last year, in the sense that we now do not have, you don't have new taxes that are being introduced. Although if you read it critically, you may see some areas that revenue is being gotten, but not the way it was in the last year.
There you have it. That's Fred Kimotho, Associate Director at Deloitte East Africa, and also Tax Policy Lead there, and really helping us chew through the advanced stages, actually the introductory stages of this particular bill, 2025, which is right now in Parliament, currently under review by the Department Committee on Finance and National Planning. I hope you've taken your take out, and of course, just enlightening you more. What else can you do? Public participation is open. Make sure you do and give your part before June or the deadlines happen. Thank you so much for your time. I'll leave you now with the markets. That's it right here on the Trading Bell.